everyone, and welcome to MEFG in Conversation, our series dedicated to exploring timely topics with key industry leaders in the innovation ecosystem. My name is Priya Rajan, and I'm the Managing Director responsible for National VC coverage at MEFG Tech Banking Group. Today, I'm excited to welcome Praveen Akiraju, Managing Director at Insight Partners. Insight Partners is a global private equity venture capital firm that manages $90 billion in assets under management, supporting 600 plus companies, and invests across stages with a focus on sectors such as fintech, cybersecurity, AI/ML, DevOps, and healthcare. Praveen, as a seasoned operator, founder turned investor, brings a product and operating lens to investing. He focuses on areas such as automation, data platforms, DevOps, security, and infra software. Super excited to welcome Praveen today. And Praveen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Priya. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Today, we're going to dive into one of the topics that you deeply care about, AI and automation. But before we get started, maybe can you share a bit of a brief background about yourself and the fund's investment thesis?
Absolutely. So once again, a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on the show, and look forward to the conversation. I'm a long-time Silicon Valley participant here, both as an operator, joined Cisco early on in my career, spent 19 years there running engineering teams, building products. So essentially grew up as a product person, and then essentially became, as the cloud space was taking off, had the opportunity to run a cloud infrastructure company. We built that out to scale, about $1 billion in revenue before we were acquired, and then did a startup in the software-defined networking space before my journey onto the investing side of the house. So I've been at Insight now for about 4 years. As you mentioned, Insight is Insight is sort of, I would say, like one of the first firms to actually have this conviction around software eats the world well before that was kind of a term that was that came into vogue. So we were started about 25 plus years ago with the thesis that essentially software is a fundamental construct of the modern economy, and so we started really focusing on B2B software investments as a core thesis of the firm. Since then, we made about 600 plus investments, primarily again in the B2B space, as you mentioned, a couple of the areas that you talked about, vertical software, infrastructure software, and being able to have the opportunity to partner with founders globally, right? In the US, in Israel, in India, Europe, and such like. We're about 90 billion plus in terms of capital commitments that under management. We've got about 55 IPOs as a firm. Really proud of that, and really proud of the opportunity to work with those founders, some amazing founders. So Insight's unique in the sense that we are a multi-stage investor. We do. Essentially, I would say start from a post-product market fit stage. So you could call that a Series A, Series B, but I kind of try to think about it more in terms of sort of the stage of the company. So post-product market fit all the way through. We have a part of the team that focuses on the buyout opportunities as well. So we have a pretty broad sort of remit in that sense. Obviously, different managing directors in the firm focus on different aspects of the different stages of companies to invest in. But one of the advantages of kind of having such a broad view is that we have some unique capabilities as a platform. We like to basically think of ourselves less as sort of capital providers, more as sort of company partners in building companies with our founders. So our platform essentially you could think of sort of taking the journey of a company, breaking that into multiple pieces from, essentially hiring great talent, building great go-to-market engines, being able to sort of provide connectivity to a broad range. We have about 2,500 plus executive uh, network that we work very closely with. So being able to bring everything from talent to sort of perspectives on how to scale your company to customers to enable our founders to build these great franchises and great companies. So we think of ourselves as essentially helping our founders go from the startup to a scale-up journey all the way through an IPO. And as I mentioned, we've been lucky, fortunate enough to have about 55 of those working with some amazing founders. So I'll pause here, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of kind of my background and insight.
That's great. And where are you based, Praveen? Where are you in?
I'm based in the in the San Francisco Bay Area. Very much part of the tech bubble that we have here. As I mentioned earlier, sort of I was fortunate enough to kind of join Cisco at the early days of the internet revolution. So it was just amazing to kind of see the internet go from sort of a research infrastructure to essentially become the underlying infrastructure for the modern economy, the cloud sort of transition, the mobile transition, and now obviously, generative AI. Yeah. So, having been part of this ecosystem, you kind of get a sense for sort of how these technologies kind of evolve and the impact that they're able to create.
It's fascinating. It perfectly ties my kind of the next question here. With such a strong operator background that you have, and then to, of course, a serial investor now, how has that journey kind of shaped how you look at investments, and also how do you work with portfolio companies?
Yeah, no, I think it's been an interesting journey for me. Obviously, from my perspective, I didn't kind of envision myself as an investor at this stage in my career. I think I was having a lot of fun, essentially building products and companies. But the thing that you sort of realize, sort of, one of the things when you build products from a whiteboard stage to all the way into a customer's hands, and honestly, down the life cycle of essentially end of lifing a particular product, you get a pretty deep understanding of what it takes in each stage of that journey, right? And you realize how challenging it was. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have different roles. I was a senior vice president at Cisco, running a good chunk of the enterprise business there. I would say the hardest job I ever did was to essentially be the CEO of Viptela, which was the startup, where we were doing software-defined networking, and we had like 40 people, right? That was the hardest job that I've done. So, building startups is an incredibly challenging task for a variety of reasons. There's no safety net for one, but every decision matters. But it's also the engine that drives obviously Silicon Valley, but broadly speaking, the technology landscape. So, as an operator, I think you get a really good sense of the journey of what it takes to deliver a product, what customers truly care about, right? And most importantly, how hard it is through that journey, and the being able to sort of understand and empathize with founders as they go through that. Having been through that and in that chair, when I'm on the other side of the table, I have a good sense of sort of how a founder might be thinking, or what they'd be kind of the trade-offs that they'd be weighing.
Yep. Empathy, for sure. That's the word. And you're still building it. Today, you're building with the founders. You also lead the Ignite program at the firm. We talked about it offline, which ties a lot of what you're saying together, both the experience from before, but also what you're doing at Insight and what Insight offers kind of as a platform. Can you share a bit more about that program?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's I think one of the things I fundamentally believe, and this comes from my operating background, is customers are oxygen for a startup, or for a company. Being able to get in front of a customer essentially is one of the most important things in the journey of a startup, both because obviously the commercial aspects of it, but more importantly, I think that's the way you kind of iterate and you build and you learn and you get better, right? And you understand, because the purpose of a company, an idea, is to be able to deliver value for your customers. So one of the key pillars of our strategy at Insight is to be able to facilitate the connectivity for our founders with a wide range of CXOs. So CIOs, Chief Information Security Officers, Chief Data Officers, VP of Engineering level folks, essentially people who are building IT infrastructure at large enterprises and mid-sized enterprises who are potential customers for our startup. So Ignite, essentially, think of it as a three-sided network. On one side, you have our portfolio companies and our founders. On the second leg of that stool is really the executive network that we have of essentially global Fortune 2000 customers, buyers, essentially of various sort of in various disciplines. And then the third leg of that stool is essentially our deal teams and our investors. So Ignite brings all of these three things to these three kind of stakeholders together. And so we're able to facilitate from a founder portfolio company perspective. For some of our companies, we do about 50 introductions to customers, right, in a year. So effectively contributing to their pipeline, if you will. And it makes a huge difference, particularly for early stage companies, to be able to get in front of, a large bank or an insurance company or, a manufacturing company, in the right person, right? And so that's the real value for them. For executives, I think this is really a great way, because we tap their expertise in terms of some of the diligence we do. So we kind of incorporate their understanding of the space. And sometimes technologies can be too late or too early or too complex, right? And we get a really good perspective. And from there, for a lot of them, it's really about tapping into the cutting edge of technology. Where is the innovation, right? So I was talking to a CIO at a large bank in Europe last week, and they were going through this fundamental transformation project around how do I leverage automation, right, to get more efficient, to get their KYC process more efficient. And so, because we have this broad perspective of talking to a lot of startups and founders, along with sort of having invested in a bunch of amazing companies, we're able to give them a, unbiased, like we're not obviously trying to pitch our companies, just to kind of give them a sense of here's where the state of technology is. Here are sort of the things that we evaluate in terms of risks and opportunities as we think through a particular technology space. So it's very valuable for them. We've presented in boards of some of these companies to provide sort of a technology perspective. And then finally, for us as investors, right, and on the deal team side, it's really an education for us as well, right? So it helps us make better decisions, right? Be able to help our portfolio companies better. So Ignite's really sort of this three-sided network where we bring these three, stakeholders together, and it's an amazingly successful program. Our founders love it. We have tremendous amount. We do a very kind of methodical NPS with our founders at the end of every year, and it's clearly makes a significant impact for them.
It's incredible. We recently hosted, as you know, the CIO CISO event, and it was the first of hopefully many that we end up doing. Absolutely, this is huge value to the companies, specifically getting the decision maker in front of them, and it's incredible.
Yeah, again, like as an operator, as a CEO, so that's kind of what I would look for. I look for from my board, right? Essentially, being able to get me the meeting with the right person. So I think it's invaluable. Now, make no mistake, the company still has to earn the right to, to sell the product to the customer, right? So it's clearly not our job to be able to make sure that the customer buys it, but fundamentally being able to get them in front of the line, I think is massively valuable. That's as a CEO, that's all I wanted, right?
Absolutely. And, talking about market and opportunity, you've talked about the current era as the age of AI co-pilots. Can you elaborate more on that one and share some your insights around kind of potential AI impact on workflow automation?
Yeah. I think this is sort of such a fascinating area. I sort of started to spend time in the automation space when I joined the board of one of the large RPA companies. And When I started to kind of study the space, having come from like a pretty deep engineering background, I was a bit struck by like, um, you know, how a really relatively sort of simple piece of technology had such a huge impact from a customer value perspective. And if you take a step back in an enterprise context, the challenge that we have today is that your data is essentially dispersed into so many different silos, and most times your workflows are across a lot of these silos. So there's a lot of manual work involved in extracting data from these different sort of systems of records, and then putting them together to make a decision. And automation in the business context essentially solved that problem of trying to eliminate the manual steps of data extraction when you're doing this on a repetitive basis, right? To be able to present all of this together in one space, so a human can make a decision. I think AI has been transformational for this particular space, for all the reasons that we know, right? I mean, the fact that you have an engine, right, in AI that can essentially understand the context, be able to extract the data, be able to sort of do things on a repetitive basis, right, consistently. You had sort of a fundamental acceleration in the effectiveness of automation. So now, to be clear, even before generative AI, technologies like OCR and NLP have been widely used in the automation space, right? So reading a document and being able to kind of digitize that and extracting the appropriate information. I think with generative AI now, you have the ability to kind of create a natural language interface to a lot of these automation, platforms. And so we're in the early stages of sort of how AI will kind of transform automation. Obviously today we're in the age of co-pilots, and in some ways co-pilots essentially sort of a logical step for a lot of incumbent software providers like a Microsoft or an Adobe and such like. There's this longer term vision of sort of an agentic future where you have these AI agents that are a lot more sort of a lot more capable and performant, that you can deploy for different set of tasks. And so it's kind of fascinating to see the journey from early stages of automation where we're just taking manual tasks and automating them, incorporating some level of sort of natural language recognition, as well as document data extraction, to now where you might potentially have AI agents that are able to decompose, right, a particular task from natural language into specific tasks and be able to execute those, right? So that's the journey we're on, and we're obviously in the early days of the sort of co-pilot slash agent era, but exciting times.
Yeah. And I was watching your interview on Scale AI conference that you guys did, and you interviewed some of the leaders from Microsoft. Of course, that is a big mammoth here. So any insights from that kind of conversation that you had?
Yeah. I think it was a fascinating conversation, primarily because I think obviously from Microsoft's perspective, they've been like, it's been very impressive to see how rapidly Microsoft has moved to incorporate AI as part of sort of their broader set of solutions, right? Whether it's on Microsoft 365 side or from a security perspective on GitHub, in Azure as a platform and such like. And so really the conversation was, we focused on a couple of areas. One was sort of, how do you think about sort of the state of AI as it's today, and how effective is it? Because, truth be told, I think given that we're in the early stages, it's still unclear in terms of, the true value, right, of AI. Like how much value is it truly adding today in an enterprise context, right? What is the, ROI, if you will, right? And there's some clear use cases like code generation, which we talked about, and so like GitHub launched the Copilot, right, for code generation, and it's been widely deployed. Depending on who you talk to, productivity improves anywhere from 20 to 40%, right? Depending on how seasoned the developer is and the environment is. And other areas like chatbots for customer services, as well as like marketing copy. These are three areas where there's been like product market fit, relatively speaking, for AI. It delivers clear value. And as we talked about, like with agents and automation, a lot of early work being done in these spaces. So we had a good conversation. Sort of where are we, sort of in that journey, right? And I think consensus obviously is that we're early. There's some clear use cases, and Microsoft's kind of learning a lot, right? When people use this Microsoft 365 Copilot, right? Can you truly take a Word document and make a PowerPoint? I mean, that's like almost, utopia for all of us who've been working on slides forever. Or, having this Copilot in Excel to be able to create these like charts and graphs and. So and there's some fine tuning still to be required, but I think it's direction you can see where that's going. The second part we focused on was more sort of technology wise. How does this kind of play out? Is because today you look at just in the last 6 to 7 weeks of this year, Google launched Gemini 2. You had sort of OpenAI's Sora, which is kind of a diffusion transformer, right? You had some pretty interesting things coming out of France with Mistral, right, launching next. So it feels like the pace at which just foundational technology is progressing is dramatic, right? And so we just had a conversation around like, how do you see this thing? I think one thing that we understand well today is that more compute equals a better model, right? And so we are going to see more performant models. There's still problems to be solved, like latency and cost, which I think we'll get to. But eventually, again, Moore's law has been sort of the gift that keeps on giving, and we can hopefully bet on the next 2 nanometer process to get us more horsepower and hopefully better cost as well at some point. So I think we talked about sort of where that goes, and that was sort of general consensus. And the third piece, really important piece, was really around security and responsibility, right? And how do you sort of ethically deploy AI, right? This is an area of hot debate right now, as you can see from a lot of the discussions that are happening in Washington as well as in other sort of capitals. And the EU actually is coming out with this AI Act, which has been much debated. And so again, the conversation, there's no like, different perspectives on this, but like, are we too early on regulation? Like, how do we think about open source and making sure that, we don't, throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, right, in terms of regulation and such like. And obviously from our perspective, slow, steady, thoughtful approach is kind of what we would advocate, as opposed to kind of a top-down approach, right, to regulation. But that's a conversation that obviously Microsoft has a big voice and they play a key role in. So that was the third topic that we covered. But I think when you think about this broadly, applications, just fundamental technology, the regulation and sort of ethical responsibility aspects of it, these are very important things which are will continue to evolve even as we kind of go through this year, right? And we still, at some point, GPT-5 is going to come out, Llama 3 is going to come out, right? And just the axes around which the developments are we see like multimodal models like Sora. It's I think Sam Altman calls it like a step towards an artificial general intelligence, whatever that might mean, I guess, right? It's really, I think, just trying to put a sense on like the pace at which the technology is progressing, and almost like the black box nature of it, I think, is the thing that I think we're all sort of trying to wrap our heads around and try and stay abreast of these, like, the frantic pace at which the AI space is moving.
Yeah, for sure. And the frantic pace also could be tying to the race to win. I think everybody wants to move fast to be that first mover advantage. And, I think, which is, in a way, it's good, because that kind of progresses that much further than it should. With that said, also, as you rightly said, risks comes along with it. So with so many new entrants in the field, talking about kind of where do you invest and what opportunities do you lean in on? How do you assess those risks and assess those opportunities? That's the one I want to lean in.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think this is obviously a question that we spend a lot of time on, and there's a lot of like uh, thoughtful sort of conversation on this.
Mhm.
I think a few of us are sort of spending a lot of time just kind of understanding sort of first principles, right? How is this space evolving, right? And it's been fascinating. I spend time with researchers at Stanford, uh, and on my weekends reading up the latest and greatest, trying to just basically keep my head above water, nowhere close to the level of competence to be able to understand exactly, how all of this shapes out. But I think coming from sort of a engineering product background, my approach is always to kind of approach this from like understanding the foundational aspects of what's changing, right, on the from a technology perspective, and how does that sort of affect the way a particular sort of product or business will be transformed. Um, and so if you think about AI, we kind of think about it in like maybe three layers, right? So there's obviously the model layer. We just talked about it, right? It's progressing tremendously fast. It's also, in some ways, sort of a pretty, it requires a pretty weighty investment. I think I just saw this tweet from Mark Zuckerberg where he talked about, you know, they have 300,000 GPUs, right, to train their next llama model. And, I think that counts to about 10 billion, right? Just in terms of just that particular piece of infrastructure, not talking about power and the engineers required to run it, etc. So there's a certain sort of scale level that you're at in order for you to be truly competitive in the model space. So and most of the investments there have been led by corporate investors, Nvidia, Amazon, Microsoft, all been very active. So that's one aspect of it. The second layer is sort of this sort of tooling layer. Lots of very interesting things going on there. Some pretty amazing companies. In some ways we've invested heavily in the ML ops kind of tool chain, and which is being sort of adapted for the so-called LLM ops tool chain now. So that's an area where we've invested in companies like Weights and Biases, for example. It's one of our companies that's a key player there. Fiddler, another one of our portfolio companies, and we continue to kind of understand and look at the space deeply. The next layer up, obviously, is kind of the interesting one, which is the application layer. And so there's a full spectrum. We've invested in companies like Ryder and Jasper, which are really around sort of creating marketing copy, and amazing founders doing amazing work. So really excited about those. Also companies like Workato and Bardeen that are more in the automation space that we talked about a little bit earlier, where I spend time in. Tremendous founders. We're very Workato is a company that sort of is at scale in a sense, and they've done an amazing job of incorporating generative AI to just open up more modalities, right, for the way customers engage with automation. Bardeen, sort of a AI first AI native company, if you will, just kind of building from scratch. Very excited about what they're working on. But that's a category. But broadly speaking, there's a lot of AI use cases for healthcare, detection that we invested in over the years. And again, AI is something that didn't start November 22nd when ChatGPT was announced, right? It's been, when I was in grad school, I did a course in neural networks way back when. Obviously, it didn't have the data to make it effective. But so we've been investors in AI for a long time, right? And I think we look at the application layer as kind of where there's a lot of value. I think that's a fairly consistent perspective. But I think what's interesting is sort of what is the architecture going to look like? I mean, if you think about it, right? So every new sort of technology platform drives sort of a fundamental change in the underlying architecture of a business, right? If you think about the internet or the mobile, like it was a brand new distribution platform, right? It fundamentally changed the way commerce was done. Going to stores versus getting your brown package. I guess one seems to show up almost every day at our house for some reason. But But the point I think is that it's a new architecture, it's a new business model, right, with each technology inflection. So that's the way we think about it. It's like, foundationally, how do you take an existing kind of business or a workflow and can you reconstitute it, right, with AI to be able to deliver a much better user experience and much better value. Um, so we're early in that journey, obviously, and we have some kind of investments, some which I shared, a lot more. I think we're almost like $1 billion plus invested in just AI companies over the last couple of years. So I feel like we have a good sense of the way the landscape is. Harder to predict sort of what these sort of next generation models will be. So spend a lot of time with founders and builders, right? And researchers as well, just to kind of understand in first principles, as I said, technology, architecture, business model, right? Value to the customer, and think through that. So that's the way we approach it.
Amazing. And you're about to travel to India, or?
Yes.
Yep. So talking about Insight's kind of global footprint, of course, you guys have a strong presence in UK, Germany, Israel is another big market. In addition to, of course, US is your market. What are some of the most promising opportunities, specifically in enterprise investment space, that you see globally? I mean, maybe even double clicking on India.
Yeah, for sure. So we are global investors. I think we have a fairly large footprint in Israel. It's been sort of an amazing ecosystem, tremendous founders, tremendous, just ideas and great companies from there. And Insight has been fortunate enough to partner with some really great founders and partners in that ecosystem. I think India is unique. I mean, as you know, like the India journey has been amazing to watch. Like, when I was at Cisco, we opened our first office in Bangalore, and now that's almost, 10,000 plus people, I would think, at this point, of engineers building product, right? That's generating billions of dollars of revenue. So, we had the whole sort of the systems integrator era with the, Infosys and HCL story coming out of India. And I think what that did, was that it truly enabled sort of the Indian ecosystem to have a better understanding of enterprise architecture and workflows and businesses and applications, right? Because, I still remember when I was a CEO at VCE, we were, in the Nordics with a large kind of industrial company. And along with the team there was essentially a partner from one of the large Indian systems integrators, right? So they were deeply embedded into kind of the transformation of infrastructure. And I think that created sort of a really good understanding of the enterprise, right? And amongst a broad set of engineers and business, and marketing people, product marketers in India. And so that creates a baseline for you to then build some amazing companies coming out of India, like Freshworks, and we have invested in a couple of companies. The Postman, it's a great story. Browser Stack, ChargeBee, right? These are some of our investments. But you see sort of the emergence of enterprise SaaS companies that are built at scale for a global market, being very successful, right, in global markets. I think the other thing that's also happened is the Indian domestic sort of economy having grown created a lot of large companies, that are in sort of various different, B2C categories, right? Like a lot of these kind of food delivery companies and such like. Now, it turns out like if you are a food delivery company in India at scale, your architecture and your technology is as sophisticated as any company based out in the valley, right? Yeah. You have the same tech stack, you have the same set of challenges from an infrastructure perspective, and so you're going to push the technology as hard as a company would here. So what that's now created is that you have sort of a domestic sort of sophisticated customer base that's able to push the founders to do better, right? Yeah. And that's always been the missing ingredient for India. So I think the advent of a lot of these really successful large-scale B2C companies has been transformational in terms of talent and understanding of the technology stack, right? Not to mention that India's got a huge talent pool, of engineers, and when you put together sort of the understanding of the enterprises, the technology stack, the talent, and the capital. I mean, we have been investors in India now for over basically a decade or so. I think you have sort of this amazing ecosystem. I'm always constantly surprised by the sort of the innovation and sort of the hustle that you see from a lot of Indian founders. And excited to be part of that ecosystem.
So proud to have seen the journey from, I mean, for 5 years I was involved in way back when there was like a handful of companies you can count to, having insight now, I mean, not just now, but like double clicking more so in markets doesn't do. It's incredible to see the growth, and the hustle is real for
Great
sure.
journey.
Just to wrap up, we're over time, but one piece of advice would you give to the founders today, Praveen?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I'm an old product manager. That's sort of my genes, right? So for me, customers come first. I would say to founders, like, ignore the technology hype, right? Ignore the economic cycles, like ignore the puts and takes in terms of valuations and funding rounds and such. Like, focus on the customer, right? If you focus on the customer and you're delivering value for the customer, I think the rest of the pieces fall in place. So it's always customer first. Deeply understand the product that you're building, why it makes sense to build, why that creates value for your customer. And if AI is the way to do it, fantastic, right? You leverage AI. If AI is not the way to do it, be kind of bold enough to make that call and go forward and build what your customers want. That's the way I kind of thought about when I was building products, and that's what I'd advocate now.
Yeah, great advice. It's super insightful, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you all soon.